Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of NTC 2015. It's day 2 of the Nonprofit Technology Conference in Austin, Texas. We're at the Convention Center. I'm highlighting swag, one item each interview, and today is right now. This interview is the hat from Neon CRM. Thank you for your swag donation. It goes in the pile. My guests are Dahna Goldstein, Tracy Kronzak, Marc Baizman, and Robert Weiner. And the topic is what to do when technology isn't your problem. And I'm going to introduce them a little differently because since there are 4 of them, I want to start with who's sitting right next to me is Tracy Kronzak, and she is co-founder of BrightStep Partners. Then Robert Weiner, president of Robert L. Weiner Consulting. Then we have Marc Baizman, customer success director for Salesforce Foundation. Been a lot of talk about Salesforce today, how generous they are in 10 free nonprofit licenses. And then deeply
free like a puppy, free like a puppy.
And then deeply discounted beyond 10. Very generous. And Dahna Goldstein, director of philanthropy solutions for Altum. And I want to, Dahna and Tracy, welcome back.
Thank you.
Robert and Marc, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure to have you on Nonprofit Radio. And Marc is taking one for the team by being the standee. But we want you in, but we only have 3 mics on Nonprofit Radio.
It's fine. I need to work off those breakfast tacos
Thank
anyway.
you. All right. Standing. This is your exercise. You need to have a corporate exercise program.
It's
at the
not a
Salesforce
fun
Foundation.
run. I'm just saying that.
Okay. What to do when technology isn't your problem? Tracy Kronzak, what is the problem here? Why is technology getting blamed?
Technology gets blamed because when an organization picks up a new tool, such as Salesforce, a lot of times it doesn't necessarily consider the full range of the people, the processes, and the adoption techniques required to put it into place. So, you get this great new shiny tool, and what happens either very quickly or over time, that it doesn't meet your needs, you don't know why, and ultimately people are just as angry with the new thing as they were the old thing. And we haven't had a larger organizational discussion around why it's important to understand yourself, understand the context of what you're working in, and understanding your own limitations and capacity to really adopt technology. And that includes change. Change yourself, change how you operate, and change your future planning to account for the technology that you've adopted.
Okay. We're at the sort of overview stage. Robert, you want to contribute?
So I think, in addition to everything Tracy just talked about, a vision of what success means and how to reach success. What are the ingredients for actually getting there? It's not just like buying a new car and you sit in it and you turn the key, and if it's got gas in it, it should move forward. It's not that simple. There are a lot of moving parts that either the nonprofit or the vendor or a consultant needs to configure in order for the system to work, and that's so easy to neglect.
Marc? Overview time?
Ultimately, it comes down to people. And as we know, people are fuzzy and hard to work with and fun and wonderful.
Oh, good.
And,
okay.
and are great. But throwing technology at things like people problems and process problems is going to not fix the problem. And you're going to end up, unhappier and maybe spending a lot of money and a lot of time.
Dahna, sounds like we need some organizational introspection.
We do need some organizational introspection, which is a challenging thing for a lot of organizations to do. We've all had experiences where it's so easy to point at the technology as the problem and say this database just doesn't work, or the website isn't working, it isn't doing what we needed to do. The organizational introspection aspect of it is to say, you know what, we made the wrong decisions. We don't have the right processes in place. Sometimes we don't have the right people in place. Those are difficult conversations to have. It's challenging just to even carve out the time to have those conversations, but there is sometimes a necessary recognition that the way that we're doing things has not been the right way. So we need to change the way that we're doing things so that we don't get ourselves into this type of situation again.
And as we're talking, I want to encourage you to just jump in. I mean, don't wait for me to call on, something. Let's have a conversation. Well, go ahead, Robert. Yeah.
So one of the alternate titles for this session was Management Problems Disguised as Technology Problems.
That's a good subtitle.
So a new piece of technology is not going to fix a broken management system, a broken culture, or the lack of communication between people or departments. It, in fact, will often magnify those problems and make them worse.
Can we identify, Mark, you want to say
I was
something?
gonna I'd just be remiss if I didn't say, by the way, this is not unique to nonprofits, right?
Yes.
This is endemic to any organization, and I've spent some time in the for-profit sector, and if anything, it's just as effed up there as it is in the nonprofit sector.
All right. And that's as far as we can go on the expletives, because now...
Noted.
Yeah, thank you. We had trouble last year, but nonprofit radio was not terrestrial then, but now it is. We have AM and FM affiliates, so...
Yep. Don't want the FCC on us.
We have to keep it clean. That's right.
Also, too, the thing that I would point out is sometimes the best managerial decision that your organization can make when it comes to adopting new technology is actually to say no. Say, no, we're not going to do this right now because we have these other things to solve. We have to solve how our people work together, our common understanding of what these things mean that we're putting into the technology. And, we have to put the right sponsorship in place in our organization. It's not enough for a managerial team to say, go ahead and make these things happen. Nonprofit leaders today must be fluent in technology. And if they're not, they're as remiss as if they're not fluent in finances, HR, or other key functions of an organization.
This introspection is going to be very, very hard, though. Tracy, what you're suggesting is... incredibly, very much needed, essential, but it just doesn't sound likely that an organization is going to say, that a CEO is going to say, we've got these organizational issues, we need to deal with these before we try to apply a technology solution.
Well, it's certainly not going to happen overnight. This has to be an ongoing process.
But awareness is helping.
Awareness
this
is
discussion,
a necessary first step in having conversations with colleagues and sometimes colleagues outside your organization. One of the things that we think is both challenging and an opportunity is that it can frequently be the person who's in the techie role who has an opportunity to really push those conversations forward. That if the management or the leadership of the organization it doesn't have the level of awareness of the problem or is sort of trying to put technology solutions in place where it's not really a technology problem, the technology person, whether it's an accidental techie or IT staff or IT director, has an opportunity to help frame that conversation. And one of the things that we've talked about before that is can be a really interesting exercise. One of the things that needs to happen if you're being pushed in the wrong direction, or if you think that you're being pushed in the wrong direction, if leadership is taking things in a technology direction without having an understanding of the risks, the problems, the process issues that may be underlying, you may, as the techie, want to say, no, this is a really bad idea. Mm-hmm. And there's a sort of easy technique that one can try that actually comes from the improv world of rather than saying no, because people don't respond well to no, particularly EDs or CEOs or whoever may be, sort of up the organizational food chain. So if you're in the role where you're being asked to do something and you see that there's a problem, rather than saying, no, that's a terrible idea, frame the no as yes and. So yes, I hear what you're saying, and you can then move the direction in the conversation that you want to move it. This is more of a tactical kind of thing to do than a strategic kind of thing to do, but in terms of starting to shift the conversation, starting to shift that change in the organizational dynamics, that's one concrete thing that people who may not be in a position of objective authority can do to start moving the conversation in the right direction.
Okay. One of the other things I think that's really helpful is having leadership kind of paint the picture of what success actually looks like, and then getting under the hood and saying, okay, so how are we going to measure that? So talking about the theory and the strategy of, okay, this is, the desired end state of, what the technology implementation is designed to achieve. And then how are we going to measure that end state and perhaps the progress along the way so that, we know that at the end of this, we'll be spending, 1 hour per grant proposal instead of 3 days or something to that effect.
Add some metrics to it that are unrefutable.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Robert?
But at the big picture level, if this were easy, we wouldn't be bothering with this session.
Yeah.
The purpose of this session is to say, this is hard, you're not alone, you're not the only nonprofit techie or accidental techie who has ever faced this kind of situation before, and here are some tips and techniques that you can take home and use when you're faced with this kind of situation, which you certainly will be.
Okay.
Right.
Before we get... go ahead, Tracy.
I was just going to say, just remember, too, technology doesn't have feelings. Technology doesn't have quirks, it doesn't have feelings, it doesn't have exceptions.
But people do.
But people do. And, the trick of every technologist is to take an organization that is driven by a heart and match it to a tool that has no heart. Technology has a lot of other things working for it, but one thing it doesn't do is express feelings. So, when you're a nonprofit, it's really hard sometimes when you have a bunch of feelings about tools that you don't necessarily understand to have these conversations around, well, before we get to something that's going to force us to standardize, we need to understand what we're even standardizing around.
Right. Some people don't use the same terminology for things like what's a donor, right?
Yeah. What's a household?
What's a household, right? The basic definitions where, well, Caitlin's been doing it this way forever, but, Jim does it this other way. So let's actually get together and talk about that stuff. And that hashing out and those conversations, maybe the technology person is the one who has to facilitate those conversations, which, let's face it, technology people maybe aren't the best folks to be doing that.
Yeah, all right. Can we identify some symptoms of organizational malaise, or whatever we want to call them, that exist, but technology is being blamed? We have some symptoms around this.
We do have some red flag phrases.
Okay.
Is what we call them in our session, and I've been talking a lot, so let me turn it over to my other co-presenters.
Maybe we could just toss some of them out. But one of them is, I have a board member who used this solution in his for-profit company and thinks it's going to be perfect for us. Another one is, this tool is free.
I used it at my last nonprofit, which is utterly unlike my current nonprofit, but it was great there.
Yeah, okay.
Another one is, can you make it look just like the thing we're leaving? Or can you make it happen in 3 weeks?
Can you make it match our broken business processes?
Okay. You got one, Mark? Do you want to throw one?
Nah, that's good.
Okay. That was quicker than I thought it was going to be. All right, for the symptoms part. What about after the technology's already been adopted? We've spent the time and the money to go through the due diligence process. We've brought in all the important stakeholders, from end users to board members who get quarterly reports. The technologies, we've paid for it. It's in our office, and it's being blamed. Now where do we stand?
So my response to that is, what is your ongoing investment in the technology? Mm-hmm. And that's dollars. That's also people and time, right? Which are all essentially the same thing. If you think that by flipping the switch on day one and sending people to a training class or getting a bunch of folks around a presentation screen, you're fooling yourself that is all you need to do. You really need to have a comprehensive plan of post-launch adoption. You'll need to have things like open lunch and learns. You'll really need to invest in the success of the technology. When you have a car, you don't just expect that the thing is going to work forever. You got to take it in and get its oil changed and get the air filters and all that nonsense. Why should it be any different with this type of technology?
Okay, more. Yeah, let's.
The problem is that we've entered an era where consumer technology and what we call enterprise technology are kind of becoming merged together, and the expectations of a lot of folks have been reduced in terms of the complexity of adopting technology. So, I have an iPhone and I press a button and things happen.
Yeah. Minute one, I can operate it.
Exactly. And the thing is that when you're working from that framework, you don't realize that, pulling together a Salesforce database or adopting any kind of CRM or, even just turning on a social media kind of community for your organization, it's not a button click. It's a very long tail operation. It requires ongoing maintenance, and if your expectation is you're going to open it up and have it just the same way that I open up Word and have a Word document, or press a button on my iPhone and get the weather, then you're not really considering the full capability of your technology, and where a lot of organizations stumble.
And all its implications.
Exactly. And where they stumble sometimes is they're like, we have $18,000 to do this. We're going to spend all $18,000 getting it done, and never consider that next year they might need to spend another $4,000 just to keep the darn thing running.
Or we have $0 to do this whole thing, and oh my gosh, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The free thing that we got stinks.
Yeah.
And part
Well, of course, right? What have you invested in it?
Yeah.
Do you have somebody who's actually trained on how to use the free thing? No. Okay, well, of course it sucks.
And you asked about what do you do when you've got the technology and you hate it, but we're rebutting that and saying before you turn the technology on, you need to take these steps. You need to go first. You need to go through a needs assessment to make sure it's really the right technology. Second, you need to manage expectations that this is not a magic wand that you're going to turn it on and life is going to be perfect. And third, that you need to go through a change management adoption process so that people are on board with what the decision was, why you bought this technology, how you're going to use it, how it's going to change your life in the organization, and that there's ongoing support and training so that you're successful not just on day one, but into the future.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of guests talk about, and panels talk about the importance of having all the stakeholders involved. From when you're at the stage of just questioning whether the existing technology needs to be replaced, the answer to that may be no, and that's what you're all talking about is subsumed in that possible no.
Absolutely, and I would take that even a step further, that the question to ask isn't necessarily whether the technology needs to be replaced, but what is the business need that's being met or unmet by the technology? And then is there a better way that business need, mission-driven business need, can be met through a different technological solution, through a process change? But I think a lot of where organizations end up going wrong is finding a solution and then sort of looking for the problem to have it fit. That works never.
Or they're in so much pain that anything new looks viable. And that's also a very dangerous position from which to operate.
And in fact, this very expo hall that we sit in is full of solutions and glossy brochures to problems that you may or may not have.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a highly
Salesforce
technical
included,
term
PS.
for what Dahna's describing too, and that's called business process reengineering. But the very simple explanation for that term is that when you adopt a new tool, that tool has a certain way of operating, and it has parameters under which you can change, customize, and adopt it to how your organization behaves. But at the end of the day, those parameters are not infinite. You have to adopt to the tool that you are purchasing or acquiring or building just as much as the tool itself can be adopted to how you do business. And meeting in the middle like that, organizations don't consider the real time and energy and effort and money that it requires to do that. So they turn the lights on with a new tool, and the tool doesn't meet their needs because they haven't ever thought about how their needs are going to match what this new tool is providing for them.
And we're not saying that technology is never the problem.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes your technology truly does stink, but that's a fraction of the problems that I've seen in 20 plus years of consulting with nonprofits. A lot of the time, the technology may be perfectly fine, but you can't possibly make it work with your current business processes or your current staffing skill set.
Another possibility is the existing technology could be modified without having to bring in something wholesale, new and different.
Or amended. You can add some new piece of technology on top of your current systems in order to get through some period until you can afford to make a change or afford to hire new staff or upgrade their skill sets.
And that continues to go back to what we sort of refer to as three legs of a triangle. That when you're looking at any technology problem, it may present as something that is the actual technology. Oh, the database is the wrong database. It's not going to work for our organization. But the three elements that we encourage people to think about are, and this can happen before you're adopting a new technology, it can happen after you've adopted the new technology and it's not working for you, to look at whether there are people issues in your organization that are getting in the way, to look at whether there are process issues that are getting in the way, and to look at whether there are adoption issues that are getting in the way. So all of these processes can happen before, during, and should happen before, during, and after the technology adoption. So if an organization has gone down a wrong path, or the technology has been in place for a long time and the needs have changed, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to jettison the technology. But Tracy was talking about business process reengineering. It's a matter of understanding what the business needs are, where the current tool is falling short, but looking at it, again, from those business needs perspective, rather than what can we massage in the technology to sort of take advantage of the latest and greatest features. what do we actually need? Is this technology solution going to meet those needs? How are we making the decisions? Have we budgeted appropriately for this? Do we have the right support in place for our users? Is this helping us further our mission? Are we doing this because it looks fancy or because a board member told us to? So there are a lot of problems, and there are a lot of things that can get in the way of making the right decisions. But we really want to emphasize the importance of looking at people, processes, adoption, and support.
Let's talk about some process in this introspection endeavor, exercise that we talked about earlier. How does this, we've already talked about really how the conversation should get started, coming from different levels, but how are we going to actually do this evaluation of what are our real problems and needs? Nobody?
So,
Go ahead, Robert. Robert.
So this conference and our world, our nonprofit world, has a lot of consultants, speaking as one, but a lot of vendors as well who are really smart about these things. And you frequently don't have the experience within your organization because at least the kinds of big projects we're talking about, you don't go through every day. You might go through them once every 5 years, once every 10 years, once every 20 years. So you don't have the on-the-ground, day-to-day experience of going through this kind of needs assessment, selection, adoption, implementation, change management process. So you may need outside help in order to get through this. You may need outside fresh blood in the organization on staff who have experience with these kinds of issues. But we're not saying that if you've made these mistakes and hit a wall that your life is over and you might as well just turn off the lights. There are people who are smart enough to bail you out.
Okay. I'd be remiss if I didn't direct folks to the idealware.org website, which is really a fantastic resource. I like to think of it as the consumer reports of nonprofit software.
Very much so. Yeah.
And it's where I direct a lot of folks who are just getting started. Obviously, because I work for the Salesforce Foundation, a lot of folks come to me and ask me about Salesforce, and it's sort of like, hey, do I need this Lexus? And maybe, I don't know, where are you going?
Yeah.
Maybe you need a bike. Maybe you need a scooter. I don't know. Yeah. So I direct folks to Idealware to do a little bit of a deeper dive into their actual needs. And Idealware's done a great job of there's a selecting a donor management system workbook, which is sort of takes you.
I didn't know about the workbook. I just know about the objective evaluation.
So the evaluation stuff is great, but there's a workbook which really it steps you through. I think maybe not as advanced a level as what Robert would do, but the same type of thing where you could kind of take that internally to your organization and ask some of those questions to folks.
Okay, excellent resource. Thanks, Marc.
I also want to point out too that in the 5 years or so that I've been doing Salesforce consulting and working with organizations to implement Salesforce as a real tool, I've heard so many times, yes, we understand that's how the real world does it, but we are very special and our process is very different, and we are very special.
Beautiful snowflake.
Yeah, we are a very special snowflake. And
are you frozen water?
Yeah, frozen water.
Let it go.
And that's the problem with saying that. It's because to pick on a very easy process like fundraising, there are many national organizations that are designed around helping nonprofits understand standard fundraising behavior and how that should be treated in an organization. So, when I go in and I hear something really exceptional, I'm like, why are you so exceptional when the best practice for fundraising is this, this, and this? And sometimes it's as easy as asking that question internally, like, why do we think we're so exceptional? And sometimes there are really exceptional things, like we distribute, books to homeless folks.
Yeah.
And that's a very small and special thing, but that's got nothing to do with how an organization, specifically a nonprofit, should operate and the best practices around that operation. So if your organization is divergent from how the industry operates, that's a really good place to start in realigning yourself to how you actually literally conduct business, because all of these tools that Marc mentioned are designed around the best practice of nonprofit operations.
And a start
step
there.
up your own work.
A start there is to just be sure that you understand how your organization does things. From a diagnostic perspective, frequently, I don't know, things just sort of happen. I make this decision and then I send it to this other department and somebody approves something and, then it's done. Something that organizations can do internally is take a representative sample from across the organization and just document how things actually happen. Whether you're bringing in a consultant, whether you're working with an Idealware resource, whether you have the capacity on staff to be able to do the kind of document generation and then maybe an RFP if that's where you end up heading.
Okay.
That simple process of just documenting where things are now can be really, really enlightening.
And another,
Robert gets the last word, and
So,
we just have a couple seconds left.
in addition to the resource that Marc talked about, we have discussion lists on NTEN, there are discussion lists on TechSoup, there's the Progressive Exchange. There are lists where you can ask other people, this is how we do it at my organization, does this make sense?
Yeah.
Have you ever
Salesforce
seen
Foundation, Power of Us Hub.
Salesforce Foundation and Power of Us Hub.
Yep.
That's part of the Salesforce Foundation?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you very, very much. I love it.
Thank you so
Spirited.
much.
My
Thanks, Tony.
pleasure.
Thank you very
Uh,
much.
this? Tony?
My pleasure, all of you. They are Tracy Kronzak, co-founder of BrightStep Partners, Robert Weiner, president of Robert L. Weiner Consulting, Marc Baizman, consumer success director for Salesforce Foundation, and Dahna Goldstein, director of philanthropy solutions for Altum, ALTUM. Thank you again all very much. Tony Martignetti, Nonprofit Radio, coverage of NTC, the Nonprofit Technology Conference. Thank you for being with us.